Good evening, everybody. We'll begin on page 380. Chapter 14. That's when we were able to disarm the internal and external weapons systems. It was thanks to Lieutenant Vaughn and the rest of the SEALs, and Agent Al-Rahman, that we were able to gain access. If they hadn't hacked into the computer database and powered it down, we would have been stuck. But as I stated before, that didn't disable the weapons systems. She had a backup power supply that I wasn't able to find, let alone disable, until I realized where the power signature was coming from several minutes later. The bomb wasn't possible to disarm. We had never seen its design before, Norman concluded, sitting down at the conference table in the same room in Seattle where Kerry had been introduced to Kirby's team. To the lieutenant, it seemed like an eternity ago. Director Fenton did not look pleased. He turned to Kerry. Lieutenant O'Malley, is there anything you'd like to add to this, specifically regarding the novel systems Smith invented? Kerry had already had her turn to speak. She had given a detailed report of everything she had done and cited her confusion at the entire nature of the mission. She understood why she had not been told that they had identified Smith's location as a decoy. It had to be convincing if they were going to keep Smith on the hologram pad and talking to Kerry while they narrowed down her actual location. It was only because of her distraction that they were able to kill her. But she did not understand what had happened to disable their communications, or why the SEALs got them in but were unable to stay to get them out, or why Al-Rahman and Hanrich had died if they were supposed to be guarded. She also wanted to know how Smith had gotten a hold of her choices, which were supposed to be guarded at the very highest levels of government, and she wanted to know for what purpose the Diablo could possibly be collecting DNA samples. When she had brought up these questions during her report, Fenton gave her no additional information and said he was unhappy with his lack of knowledge on those matters as well. He apparently was also unhappy that Smith had been killed instead of tranquilized, because the entire reason the FBI was interested in helping the military capture her was because she had information regarding Tajada's planned terrorist attacks. With Fenton's lack of available answers, Kerry recognized this was not the venue to ask her questions. She hoped to seek an audience with the Navy or with the CIA. At the very least, she could raise her concerns with Captain Wall. But for now, she shook her head as she answered Fenton's inquiry. No, sir. Anyone else? Lyle spoke. The aviation-capable submersibles she had were mostly destroyed, but we were able to recover 2 from flight. The opportunity to study them would benefit the FBI. We don't have anything like them. I think they must have operated based on some kind of anti-gravity technology, and based on what I've seen so far, they may hold the key to developing an antimatter source for power. They would give us an unprecedented ability to investigate underwater drug trafficking. What are the chances we might be able to visit the Navy hangar where they're being kept? Already done, Fenton said, looking satisfied for the first time since the meeting started. You leave tomorrow afternoon, Lyle. You'll head to Ohio where they're being kept. Lyle tried not to grin. Thank you, sir. Director Fenton cleared his throat. We've discovered something recently that I thought I should share with all of you. The Diablo were already quite angry with Smith. They suspected that she was using her position as leader of the American branch of the gang to avenge her boyfriend's death and her child's custody arrangements. Lieutenant O'Malley, were you aware of her position in the Diablo? Not exactly, Kerry said, surprised. We knew she was higher up in their ranks. She couldn't have gathered the resources she did without being that high. But she laid low and used some lower-ranking people to do her dirty work, some of which were still at large, like Ted Davidson, who escaped prison. And the lower-ranking people have no connection to one another. Each arrest would have been a dead end, Chris offered. They gave us information, but not as much as someone higher-ranking would have. She had those people knocked off, like Hugh Payton. They all nodded. Director Fenton placed a pad on the table. Anyway, because Smith has left a large vacancy and because they were already displeased with her, we were able to maneuver a few of our undercover agents closer to the top. Kerry nodded, pleased with the news. As for Tajada, Fenton continued, we have agents currently moving in to stop his attacks and apprehend him. The NSA is in on it as well, and all commercial flights have been cancelled for the next 24 hours. But we'll have a GF-20 take you back to Chicago tonight, Lieutenant. Kerry smiled. Thank you, sir. She had slept 12 hours last night, and for once in her life was almost late for a meeting. She hadn't wanted to leave her bed in the condo on the beautiful island, but she had been forced to, so she could catch the GF-20 to Seattle. I want to thank you for your involvement in this, Lieutenant. We couldn't have done this without you. And thanks to you and the SEALs, a very dangerous criminal is now dead. I don't have to say what significance that has. Kerry shook his offered hand, standing up. I only wish we had more answers, Director. He agreed with a nod and said, Well, if I can ever help you with anything, you have my number. Scene change. With the meeting over, they left the building and went directly to the airstrip. A GF-20 was waiting for Kerry. It's been a pleasure to meet you and work with you, Lieutenant, Norman said, shaking her hand. Thank you, Kerry returned with a smile. You too. It really has been an honor, Lieutenant. I hope we get the opportunity again, Kirby told her, giving her a firm handshake. I do as well, Kerry said honestly. You can keep the hat, Chris said, referring to the bright red hat he had given her on the first day of their mission. And remember to wear it when you bring your kids to Hilton Head. If you bring them in August, I'll be taking people out on my boat, near the cafe. If I spot that hat, I'll give you a discount. I'll remember that, Chris, Kerry said with a grin and shook his hand. Take care. You too. With that, she boarded her GF-20 and was not entirely surprised to see Agent Anderson on board. Lieutenant, he greeted, smiling. Agent Anderson, I take it you were told everything? Not everything, but enough. Congratulations. If you're offering congratulations, apparently you weren't told enough, she said, and slung her bag into the overhead compartment as she sat down. There are a lot of unanswered questions, and 8 people died, including 6 SEALs. The Navy's conducting a critique. We lost all the evidence in the base explosion, and the only plus side to this is that Smith is dead. She frowned and asked, How's the hunt for Tajada? Almost finished. Were you briefed? Not really. I know air traffic is grounded. I'll get you a report and bring you up to speed. He started to take out a pad from his briefcase, then hesitated. I'll bet you're exhausted. You probably want to sleep first. I slept for 12 hours. I'm all right. What I'd like specifically is an update on how things are going at the crime lab. Anderson nodded and began summarizing everything. Tillman had ordered them to continue working on the case, but to stay away from Smith's involvement. They had been able to connect the Mantinelli family to Lorenz and Carlos without any problem. The trail to Ted Davidson stopped at a small airport in South Carolina, leading Anderson to believe that it was possible he was traveling to the underwater base. He was either at large somewhere in the world or dead, and the FBI was leaning toward the possibility of his death because of the fact that he had botched the coordination of the assassination attempt on Neil and the children. The crime lab had successfully connected him to Chuck Butler's apartment, Derek Warren's house, and the parking lot at the grocery store. Yesterday, they had linked the man to the social services hack, and just 2 hours ago the FBI verified that he was also in the emergency room at the hospital where Connor was staying. Kerry nearly shivered at that last bit of news. Derek was nervously awaiting his trial, and there would be arrangements made for Kyle and Amber to stay in the U.S. Marshal custody until the trial was over. It's interesting. I get the feeling that Warren is one of the most innocent parties in all of this. He built the bomb that was a central piece in a number of parties' attempts at mass destruction, but he was reluctant throughout, and he almost blew himself up over the situation. He was willing to risk that his shielding invention wouldn't work if it meant that his son would get away safely. Anderson snorted. That man has a long way to go before he's considered innocent by anyone. It might take a while, but my instincts tell me he's capable of rehabilitation. Anderson nodded and said nothing else. He sat back in his seat and looked out the window, taking a sealed bottle of water out of his side compartment and opening it. I told your family and your team that you're all right. Thanks, Kerry said gratefully. She knew her family was worried sick. Connor especially. So you went to the hospital. How's Connor? I don't know exactly how well he's doing medically, he said. But he's being moved tonight to LaGrange Memorial Hospital, so I guess he's doing better. Right on schedule, Kerry said with a smile. I might actually be able to go there with him. Airlifted, or don't you know? I don't know, Anderson admitted. I would imagine he can only be moved 2 ways, ambulance or airlift. Kerry nodded. Yeah, I was just wondering. Anderson pulled out a package of pretzels from his compartment. Hungry? God, yes, Kerry said with a smile, and took the offered pretzels eagerly. Nothing would be better than a nice juicy steak right now, she knew. But the second she got to Chicago, she was going right to the hospital. No steak for her. The flight lasted a total of 30 minutes, and it took 20 to hover to Naperville from the airstrip. Kerry wasn't surprised when both Anderson and she had to show ID to get past the airstrip, and then had to call air traffic control to gain authorization to hover. Hover activity had been suspended for all non-essential vehicles. Tow trucks, limousines, and emergency vehicles without lights and sirens would have to wait. Normally, Kerry would have refused to hover in such a situation as the highest-level terrorism alert, but the need to see Connor was immense, and there was no one in the low-altitude hover zones anyway. She went directly to Connor's room, and showed her ID to the new FBI agent standing guard outside. Anderson nodded to him, and they walked in. Connor was sitting with Kerry's parents, tapping the screen of his electronic writing pad with the stylus. Upon her entry, he looked up, put down the stylus, and opened his arms. Kerry ran to him and embraced him with closed eyes. Her parents looked on, their expressions filled with joy. "Are you all right?" he asked her. His speech was significantly improved. "I'm perfectly fine," she said with a smile. He fingered the cut on her forehead with his thumb and said, "What happened?" She sighed. "Not much," she told him, and then repeated herself. "I'm fine. How are you feeling?" "I'm feeling better," he said, matching her tone. They both knew the other wasn't being completely truthful. "Ready to head out tonight. I get to ride in a helicopter." She smiled, wishing she could tell him that she had just taken a ride on a submarine that flew. Instead, she asked him, "Working on your book?" He nodded down to the electronic pad. "Trying to, anyway." Seamus and Kathleen had stood up at this point. "Accomplish much at the law enforcement conference, honey?" Seamus asked her, obviously looking for answers he knew he couldn't get. "Let's see if it's on the news," she said with a smile, and switched the monitor to a news site they trusted. "Law enforcement conferences get more press than they used to," Connor commented wryly. Kathleen came around to the other side of the bed and embraced her daughter. "We're so glad you're home," she said quietly. "I'm glad to be home," she said softly. She picked up the remote and selected the news story involving the underwater base. It was from only 2 hours ago. They all turned their heads to the television. "In recent breaking news, we have discovered the source of the small earthquake in the Atlantic. The collapse of a large underwater base yesterday afternoon, triggered by a highly explosive combination of nitrogen, oxygen, rubidium bomb, has collapsed a small section of the seafloor. The earthquake was not felt by any living beings except those in the ocean floor area. However, earthquake detection systems did hear the tremor. The underwater base was owned and run by a woman going by the name of Taylor Smith. Police suspect her involvement in a large international gang. FBI Director Joseph Fenton speaks." Fenton's face replaced the anchor. Taylor Smith was running a manufacturing plant for weapons and drugs. Though the drug dealing was related to the international gang in which she held a high position, the weapons were independent. We believe she intended to sell those weapons for her personal benefit. The mass production of drugs and weapons is not something the United States and the world will stand for. Her death will make the world a safer place. "Director," the reporter next to Fenton asked, "can you say if this is all connected to the current terrorism alert in the United States?" "I can't give you that information at this time." "What sort of weapons was Taylor Smith mass producing?" "I can't give you that information either." "Was Smith killed in the explosion?" Fenton cleared his throat. "Smith was killed, thanks to a team of very courageous and well-trained people. All but 8 of them escaped from the blast." The screen switched to the anchor's face once more. "The terrorism alert continues in the United States, and the United Kingdom, most of Western Europe, Russia, and China have escalated their terrorism alerts to their second highest levels. Commercial flights are still internationally and domestically grounded, and hover activity in the United States is limited to emergency vehicles traveling to an emergency. Police encourage Chicago residents to stay indoors for the next 24 hours if possible. Similar warnings are being issued throughout the United States. Stay tuned to FAN, the most trusted news site on the web. Seamus turned the television off before the news could come back up and offer a list of interactive stories. He looked at Kerry. So, this woman, Taylor Smith? She won't bother us again, Kerry said confidently, but there was something in her tone that Connor didn't like. He resolved to ask later. For now, he simply took her hand and gave it a squeeze. Then if we're safe to move, I'll go contact the doctor. Tell him we're ready on our end, Seamus said. Airspace is secured, Agent Castile told them from his position near the door. Our end's ready as well. Kerry nodded to the FBI agent. Thank you, she said. Just then, her cell phone rang. Justin, what can I do for you? She answered, putting him on video and moving the phone so he could see that Connor was also in the room. How are you? We were all told what happened. Are you okay? Kerry nodded. Yeah, I'm fine, she said with a smile. How's Connor? Moved to LaGrange Memorial? Any minute now. That's good, he said, and moved from his desk to the hallway. His eyes met hers again, and he asked, So when are you coming back? She laughed. Tillman driving you crazy? Probably the day after tomorrow. Just to wrap up a few things, though, and see this thing through with Tajada. Then I think I'm taking a vacation. He looked surprised. You know, people are starting to say with all that's going on lately that it's the apocalypse. But now I actually believe them. Oh, shut up, she said playfully. He laughed. You definitely deserve it, Kerry. Where are you planning on going? No idea yet. Well, Tillman's going back to Evanston. We're getting someone else. Oh joy, who's the Vic? He chuckled. We don't know yet. I'll try to get back quickly then, and I'll stay in contact. No, you can take longer than 2 weeks. We can hold the lab together till then. Go to Ireland and be with your family. Ah, now that comes later, a few months from now. She eyed Connor and saw him smile. For now, I was thinking, maybe in a few weeks we'll take off for Hilton Head. To beautiful place to recuperate, I hear, if the weather lets up. It will. Storm's passing, I think. I heard on the weather it's supposed to last another few days and then move east of the U.S. Well, I'll let you go. Tell the kids I said hi. Spencer wants to know that you're alive, so I'll tell him. Kerry chuckled. Yes, please do. Let him know he's welcome to come to the hospital. Bye, Justin, and thanks for holding everything together. Not a problem. Bye. She put her phone away and noticed that Connor was falling asleep. She settled into a chair next to him and held his hand as they awaited helicopter transport. We'll read more tomorrow.